My name's Sarah Thompson. I'm a strategic account director with Networked Insights. Company is based out of Chicago, Madison, Wisconsin, New York, and I am the Toronto office. Social Media Week has been very exciting so far. I hope everybody's been watching some of the streams from around the world. I know that I have while I've been working on client projects, listening to it in the background. So this is what we're going to be talking about this morning, social data for marketing intelligence. Networked Insights is a little bit different than your typical social data listening monitoring company, and as I walk through this, you'll find out what the differences are. We look at things through insights. The state of the union right now is marketers are faced with this, more of everything, more customers with voices. They have to be more agile. They have to create more content. They have more agencies, more staff. They have more products, channels. There's just so much going on, and they're doing it all with less budget and less time and less resources. So I always sympathize with the marketers. I've been in the marketing department of a few different firms, including Accenture, where most of the time you are stuck with somebody coming to you with an idea, and you're like, why would we spend money on that? But because of the power hierarchy of most organizations, you don't really get a say. So be it my 13-year-old daughter thinks this would be a really great spokesperson for this campaign, to let's just try it out and see. Hundreds of thousands of dollars are wasted in marketing all the time, and we're also demanded to have more ROI on everything that we do. I've adopted a little bit of what Forrester has done, but this is sort of what I picture a marketer is these days, and I feel like Angela probably lives this a lot, of floating on a skateboard. You have to have a impossibly good toolkit. You have to be a great storyteller. You have to understand how all of the different channels work together. You have to be passionate about the customer. You have to be insightful. You have to have research. You have to know advertising and social, and it's endless, and it's also a huge opportunity when it comes to using things like social data. So I feel the pain of being this person. You're marketing across so many different channels. It's crazy these days. So it also comes to a crux with the data explosion that's happening, and everybody talks about big data, digital analytics, where's all the data coming from? I have too much data, I can't make sense of the data. CMOs, this is a study from IBM, they talk about the data explosion as well. How do I manage through this? How do I deal with this? And it's something that, second only to social media, and the two go really well together, and we're going to talk more about that. So, not enough time, not enough resources. That's pretty much the state of affairs. Does everybody feel this in marketing? Please raise your hands if you feel this. Not enough time, not enough resources? Yes. And you have a consumer that is driving your current agenda. They are telling you what they want, what they need. It is a question of not only that you're listening, but how are you gathering that data and making sense of it to actually change the course of your marketing programs, to change even right down to your product. This is the next one. So CMOs also think that they need to be very good at understanding the voice of customer insights. Well, there's a lot of market intelligence surveys, focus groups, things that you can do, but there's newer ways of going about this. So how do you get to know your customer? That fundamentally is what everybody's talking about. How do I get more engaged with my customer? How do I make myself more relevant? How do I create content that they want to toss around and share and generate more earned conversation for me? How do I do all of this? Well, they're providing you with buckets of data, so let's make sense of it. This is probably one of my favorite quotes these days from a senior vice president from IBM about how if a marketer can grab hold of this data and make sense of it, they can make really critical decisions. And I think that really sets the stage for what I'm about to show you guys. Comparing the old and the new ways of how we've done market research. And I'm very familiar with a lot of these, from segmentation, TV media, you use Nielsen's ComScore. For celebrity tracking, you use E or Q scores. Market sizing, competition, McKinsey, Booz. I would always add my favorites like my old Accentures and others. They're expensive, and they take a long time. And by the time you've done any of these, the market has changed, the consumer has changed its mind. So how do you create that platform of information to be able to do all of these things at the bottom really, really well? Costs a long time. One of the biggest flaws about using those types of insights is that you end up with what they call a confirmation bias. If I want to go out and find something out about my company to prove myself right, it isn't hard for me to phrase the question that way for consumers. I can ask the question and get exactly the answer I want, and then go and get my funding from, the powers that be, have my budget, and off I run with the campaign. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's insightful, especially when consumers are offering you unbiased information all the time. If anybody's had the chance to read Killing Giants, it's a fantastic book talking exactly about this, about how market research goes wrong. Confirmation bias. You can go into any survey and you can have people tell you that your company is great. Well done, you're awesome, love you. That's not valuable. What's valuable is getting insightful information that is unbiased. And there's cracks in it. For instance, there was a Thai company who are indeed a drink called Red Bull. They did focus groups in the United States. When they did them, everybody said, no, this drink is disgusting. Never going to drink it. If they had followed that suit, we would never have Red Bull in North America. What ended up happening is they came up with Red Bull gives you wings. They marketed it towards the club environment. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a good friend who loves a Red Bull and vodka. So it has changed, but if they had gone with the focus group mentality, it would never have worked. So these are the old data sources. Focus groups, surveys, EQ, private communities, Nielsen, McKinsey. You get these throughout different periods of time throughout the year, never really a full picture of the consumer. And welcome to social data. This data is available for you to tap into at any time. So blogs, forums, Facebook, Twitter, owned, earned, all across these different channels. You can tap into this at any time to make a real-time decision. And this is where the value is of social data right now. So when you look at time allocation, to get to these using some current monitoring listening tools, this is sort of the before. You'll spend a lot of time data gathering, you delving into it, using your Boolean searches, queries, kind of hoping and praying, okay, what am I going to get an answer? It's really hard to do competitive insights, products. And on top of that, you're trying to discover something that you don't know yet. So how can you do that with just straight search? Networked insights, our approach is a little bit different. We look at as we want to flip the paradigm. So let's spend less time on the data gathering because we're really good at that. We can go in and discover. We're good at search. We have data dictionaries available. And let's spend more time on the insights and the implications of how to use this data. And you make smarter marketing decisions because of it. So all in all, this creates a new platform of marketing intelligence. All of this information that you can feed into different areas. Make it media buy decisions, including your creative, content development. Who are my audiences? Is it moms? Is it gamers? How is that segmentation? We do it from a psychographic perspective. And then what are the trends? Be it smartphones, what are the feature sets that people want to talk about when it comes to a smartphone? Where can you use this intelligence? Well, I probably have worked with a client in every single one of these spaces. I've done things like a Lady Gaga report on spokesperson celebrity. You can do comparatives between celebrities before you decide it. So you can dive into your audience, see if they really like this celebrity, rank different celebrities. That way you're not just making a decision based on this, that you're having some sort of other data point. And it's in real time. You can trend it. You can look at it 6 months, 3 months, last week. Product development. Say, for instance, your company is looking at stage gating something new. Let's dive in and see what my consumers are talking about. What's not working about competitor devices? What's working about ours? Brand. So you can track your brand health, sentiment. We approach sentiment a little bit differently at Networked Insights. Not really many of the tools are very good, mostly because conversation in social is a little bit painful to navigate for sentiment. I don't know if anybody reads Twitters and Facebook updates, but it's not really English. And how can you say, I love my Ford, but the car seats suck? Well, is that positive? Well, it's positive for the brand, it's negative, but there's a valuable insight in there. So from sentiment, we look at it and have people read it 3 times. We try to make sure that we get closer to the right answer. So instead of just hoping and praying that the automated sentiment tool is working, we look at it a little bit differently. So transmedia is another area that people are talking about. What's the story we should take across platforms as well? So I don't know if did anybody see the Clint Eastwood commercial at Super Bowl? It's halftime in America. If you haven't, please check it out. We did this analysis really quickly. All in all, this took, what, Zach, 5 hours? Yeah. 5 hours of work. So we had our team dive right into it and see how this campaign was performing for Chrysler. So let's take a look. Conversation trending. Clint, he had no conversation before. Commercial airs, it kind of dies down. That's all right. For Chrysler, it ended up being great because they ended up plateauing. So they were still talked about, even though Clint wasn't talked about. So they got the lift that everybody would like. This is very typical as well when you take a look at different channels. Twitter is always the fast leader, so you'll always see that spike in follow away. It's that immediacy. I'm going to tweet about it, and then I'm never going to talk about it again. From a forum perspective in blogs, you'd always see this lift as well. That's when people start catching up. It takes me a little bit of time to write a blog. It's not going to be instantaneous, so that's not surprising either. The good news over here for Chrysler is that they have a lot of great content being developed for them around this campaign. Twitter died off, but there are a lot of blogs, forums. Their SEO just increased. Now you can find a lot on Chrysler. So we did some sentiment trending on Chrysler as well. We looked at positive, negative, neutral. So only 10% of all conversation contains a brand, and of that, only 10% contains sentiment. So you have to be very careful about how much weight you put into sentiment. Most people don't talk about the downside of sentiment. I've always been very familiar with sentiment because I come from PR agency life, and I used to hand my media coverage kit to an intern and say, score this. One person reading it, making a judgment of whether or not media coverage of the last 6 months, this is PR. This is PR's sort of contribution to social media metrics. It's valuable, but what is more valuable is what is driving those positive, negative conversations. So in this instance, they were disappointed with using stock footage of Detroit. They didn't think that it was filmed there. So there is a lack of sincerity that they feel about the overall commercial. For positive conversation, they're just excited that it aired, that, you know, it is uplifting for America. So there's a lot of value in that, and the weight of that is really high. And generally, people just talked about the Super Bowl commercial. Neutral conversation is where you can find a lot of the rich insights, and people will overlook that part. But there is a lot of data to mine in there. So let's look at Clint. They love him, but he's no Eminem. So that's not surprising. He's also not from Detroit. And part of the recommendation in this instance that we would make to a brand like Chrysler is delve into the celebrities that came from Detroit. People like Kristen Bell are from Detroit. There are a lot of film directors that are from Detroit. Turn this into a documentary style. Build it out on your website. Take that content further. Make it look more sincere. Make it look like you're actually making an investment, not a one-off at the Super Bowl. It'll go a long way with people. Neutral conversation, they just talked about Eastwood's Westerns and his political aspirations. So overall for Chrysler, great result. Amazingly positive sentiment. People love the commercial. They love that the company is resilient. But they also viewed this ad as somewhat political for Obama, and that's connected to bailouts. So again, how do you further distance yourself from that? Well, it's sincerity, trust, and transparency. That's what they need to do. Does everybody know Tim Hortons? Please, God, say yes. Tim Hortons has been kind of slower to the game for doing anything in social. I think they just added their Twitter account last fall. We did some analysis, and we are also using a new technology called Doppler, and I'm going to show you that as well. So let's delve into Tim Hortons. The great thing about Networked Insights, too, is that we can segment by country. So I can tell you the Canadian share of voice and conversation, and I can tell you the global. Tim Hortons doesn't fare well globally. As you can see, Starbucks owns pretty much everything with McDonald's. Coffee Time is non-existent because it's a Canadian brand. The paradigm kind of shifts. Tim Hortons is in the picture, Starbucks, McDonald's. So you can see that it's a big three competition right there. Let's take a look at some more data. Global audience versus Canadians, we can do the comparative. We can tell you what happened in different spikes of conversation, what drove that conversation. Well, people really like to talk about Tim Hortons cards, coupons, how can I get a discount? when you take a look at blogs versus forums, nobody really talks about them in blogs at all. Forums is where conversations happen. People always underestimate forums. And I actually was talking with Zach a couple of days ago about a forum that came up in some analysis, and I'm like, what is this forum? And he listed, I don't know, 40 different sections that had massive conversations happening that nobody would ever consider. This is Timmy's on Twitter. We like to look at things via channel so that people like Angela know what she can do via channel that drives conversation. So in this instance, what happens on Twitter with Tim Hortons is a lot of Starbucks comparisons, a lot of new menu offerings, but in the morning, they talk about what they love for breakfast. So why not do a hashtag campaign in the morning? Why not do some sort of promotion tied to people that do it early in the morning? Monitor, have your team on board that time frame, just dealing with Twitter. It's a huge opportunity. So if we look at Tim Hortons from a topic discovery at Networked Insights is what we call categorization. So we take all social data, and through our what we call TDE, topic discovery, it categorizes and groups it so that you can make sense of all of this volume. So you're not clicking through verbatim quotes to try to go, what is making this conversation happen? So for Tim Hortons, 42% is driven by coupons, contests, and free. And I'm going to come back to the Canadian way of life. New espresso drinks and lasagna. The lasagna is disgusting. That's what people have basically said. They hate it. It's gross. They don't want it. And then when it comes to espresso drinks, they're comparing it to their local espresso shop. And it's just not working. So there's some tweaking that they can do. But those last two are great for StageGate. They're great for product development. Test it on Facebook. See what the feedback is. Before you make the investment, roll it out to all your franchisees. Put a huge amount of marketing dollars. Ask people what they want. Mine that information. And then run a topic discovery on it. The 25% of Canadian way of life is probably the interesting finding that I was not expecting. There's a little bit of backlash about Tim Hortons being associated so much with Canadiana. And this is something that if I was managing this brand, I would be paying attention to. People are starting to backlash a little bit about Tim Hortons being completely about Canada. It's not the thing about Canadians don't want that to be our thing anymore. So I would pay attention to that, trend it, before you launch another advertising campaign over the course of the year, because it might fall on its face. So what do people like and don't like? Well, here again is some sentiment. And it's the French vanilla latte is probably one of my favorite things. I have a friend who comes in from the UK, and the first thing she does is get off the plane and go to Tim Hortons and have a French vanilla latte. But people really loved when they could redeem McDonald's coupons for Tim Hortons, and they shared it, and it generated so much earned conversation with them and brand value. Negative conversation, they don't like the espresso drinks, they don't like the lasagna. So we always supply some quotes to our clients so that they can understand what is driving this, and Chef Boyardee lasagna, that's pretty much what people associated with. And people talked about the iPhone application and that they were going to get Christmas gifts. So let's delve further into these things. We do audience segmentation. So we find the known sites where these audiences will talk, and then we segment them so that you can see who is actually talking about your brand online. In this instance, gamers, millennials, insurance, personal finance, moms, other. Gamers talk about cheap. Millennials talk about what they like to eat. And insurance people are talking about where is Tim Hortons. I'm trying to find the location close to me. So they're on the go. This is Doppler. Doppler is new to Networked Insights. It's going to be rolled out in our Social Sense launch, which is about a month away. That is going to be our software as a service application that sits on the desktop. That's my sales pitch. This takes topic discovery and turns it on its head. So it clusters conversation over a period of time so that you can see how conversation is intertwined. So to most people, you would look at this and go, Sarah, it's a bunch of dots. But wait, this big piece of conversation is all social conversation about Tim Hortons. When people are talking about Tim Hortons, they're talking about other branded coffee conversations. There is a huge amount of couponing conversation that's clustered all over. And if there is a promotion such as the Javelia samples that were given away on Facebook, great promotion by them, generated a ton of earned conversation. Wherever you see red is Tim Hortons. Wherever you see green Starbucks. So let's break this down a little bit further. Here's November. If you take a look at all the coffee conversation for November, Tim Hortons basically owns this cluster. There are general coffee conversations, so again, they're having comparative. French Vanilla Supreme, people love it. There are coupon trading programs going on over on the right. More of that Javelia samples, this is when that campaign started. More coupon trading. Starbucks, basically non-existent in this. This is December. So here's Tim Hortons again on the right. They launched their Timmy Me application. More coupon conversation. McDonald's makes an appearance. They also had a smoker survey that appeared at this time. People are, again, trading coupons. Let's look at January. There's a little bit of a shift here. Less coupon conversation. A lot of Tim Hortons, but now they're actually starting to complain about things about Tim Hortons. They're complaining about the lids. They're also talking about the new cups. So there's a lot of insight that you can delve into. With the technology that we're going to have built into Social Sense, what you can do is click into these and delve into that conversation and see what made up that part. And then you get another Doppler, and then you delve into it further. So you can find those insights yourself. Here it is week by week. So yet a different view. Tim Hortons, comparison, coupons. Tim Hortons, coupons. Do we see a theme here? People in Canada love coupons. This is not the first time I've seen this. I did a project for Johnson & Johnson. It was a very similar result. They wanted to look at why their brand was suffering a little bit in Quebec. So we looked at a comparison between Quebec and the other provinces. What ended up happening was because they didn't go through the legalese of couponing in Quebec, because there are different hoops that they have to jump through, they never generated that extra conversation. So they never had earned and shared conversation. So their brand was lagging because they weren't offering the same benefits to people in Quebec. So the last example, how do you make more out of events? Music festivals. Did a comparison of 3 different music festivals for Labatt's so that they could see which one would make the most sense and where are the additional opportunities for negotiating and sponsorships. This is great if you're an event organizer because you can have this as an extra level of here are the results that you got for your sponsorship, here's the comparative, here's the sentiment. You can also identify new opportunities where people can sponsor. So let's go to the next one. If you run a TD on North by Northeast from last year, beer is a big component of the conversation. People really love the event. And people talked a lot about the bands. From beer, there's a few insights from this. If you're the beer sponsor, if you're doing something really clever and you're doing a smart activation in that sponsorship, there's probably more opportunity for you to be a part of that conversation and be mentioned. When we did an outdoor music festival, Osheaga, one of the top recommendations was sponsor VIP toilets. People will appreciate that. Also, a beer delivery service at a concert as being a VIP. What's the schedule? People are using the scheduling app. So prime real estate, right on somebody's smartphone. Do some promotions tied into that. People talk about it and used it. All in all, this is all about being more strategic, connecting the dots, delving into social, looking at it from insights, and supplementing some of the survey and focus group data that you've been using. Don't just listen and monitor. Really evaluate and find those insights that can change your marketing plans and make smarter marketing decisions. And this is my last little shout out. Networked Insights was ranked this past week as one of the world's 50 most innovative companies. So we are very proud of this. We ranked number 3 in advertising. We work with companies such as BlackBerry, Molson Coors, Electronic Arts. Next week, in 2 weeks, I'm going to Pittsburgh to talk about tires. So there's always something else going on at Networked Insights, and there's a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice this data. So here's just a few of our clients that we've worked with. MTV as well, that is not listed on here. We work with to help them basically launch their television shows, including a new TV show right now that they are working on. And that is it.
Good morning. Thanks for coming out so early. My name is Angela Losasso. I work for BlackBerry. I like to say I'm in the I Love BlackBerry business. We do a lot of different things at RIM, including making smartphones. What I do for them is oversee our engagement both globally and with a pivot on North America. So we have quite a few channels out in social media, but we also have our own social network. So how many of you have used BlackBerry before or are current BlackBerry customers? Oh, I love Canada. Yeah, it's a little different for me because I actually live on the west coast of the US. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I fly into town. So it's a very different market there than it is here in the home country. But we have 50 million users on BBM right now. Our actual customer base is about 75 million worldwide. So not only do we have quite an extensive and the largest social media following in the mobile industry, we have our own social network pretty much right on the device, and that's called BlackBerry Messenger. The latest fan metrics that we have, and by the way, I should introduce Anthony Plesche. He's our social media analyst internally, so he helps me get a lot of this data. 22.7 million global fans. That's fresh this week. Is that right? Just on Facebook. We have more than 1.5, probably closer actually to 1.7, 1.8 million Twitter followers across all our accounts globally. Across some of the smaller social networks where we have a little smaller presence but very active base, another 800,000 followers. So actually globally across all of our properties, we have close to 24, 25 million fans and followers. So what do we do with that? A lot of it, we just look at it for insights. Right? When we talk about data today and what we measure, we look at social media in a couple of different ways. Okay? We look at it as a way to communicate directly with our customers. Right? We look at a way for them to activate them. Right? Meaning, what do you talk about? What do you want to know from us? What do you want from us? How do you want to drive the product forward? What can we do to better serve you? Right? And when you look at that and having what surprises people about having the mobile industry's largest social media following is how can that happen? Well, one reason is that Apple's not very involved in social media when it comes to actually having official accounts. Plenty of people talk about Apple and talk about iPhone. They talk about Android. But what we do is actually connect with them on a level that they want to connect with us. And we put the data, we put the intelligence, we put the connection points in their hands, and we just simply ask, how do you want to work with us? How we use this intelligence is to help us set our go-to-market strategy. So I've only been with RIM since December 2010. Networked Insights has had a relationship with RIM for longer than that. Anthony started with us a little bit after I did. But one way we look at this is how can we take these insights from what people are saying to formulate how we go to market and how we talk with them, not only in social, but in out of home, in advertising. What kind of marketing programs should we set up? But also for what I manage and oversee, which is social media. How do you take what it is that people do and talk about in social media? How can you take that and actually activate it and put it into a marketing program? Do you send out coupons? Do you do gaming? Do you do gamification? Do you do entertainment? Do you simply just go out there and share product tips? How to use this phone better? Surprisingly, tips, how-tos, insider knowledge is probably one of our most popular topic areas as far as what drives traffic, what drives click-throughs, and what makes people happy as a BlackBerry customer is understanding how to use this. When we also look at it, one of the things we noticed, and so we ended up creating a couple reports out of this, is what are people actually saying about BlackBerry, about RIM in general? What kind of insights can we take from that to understand where our brand sits in the competitive marketplace when it comes to people choosing their phone? What can we improve better? Where do we stand against the competition when it comes to people shopping overall? What are the most important criteria for doing that? And then looking at it on the local level. How people feel about BlackBerry is very different in Canada than they feel about it in the US, and even going down to the local level, how they feel about it in region. In the Northeast, we're probably much more stronger than we are on the West Coast, of course, where Apple sits, Android sits, Microsoft sits, right? Or in the Southwest, where Samsung Mobile sits in Texas, right? Than where we are, say, in the Northeast, where Verizon sits, Sprint sits, etc. A lot of this is carrier influence as well. So really understanding your audience, where they sit, what matters most to them, what's affecting them, right? So if coverage is out on AT&T, they don't necessarily blame AT&T, they blame their BlackBerry for not working. So how can you better work with your partners and your clients? All this is expressed in social. So we work with Networked Insights to understand where that's coming from, not only what the sentiment levels are, but within the sentiment levels, what exactly is being expressed? How can we use that to take that back in and actually activate it into a go-to-market strategy or an improvement mechanism that makes BlackBerry better, either through us or through our partners? Let's move ahead real quick. So why do we use this? There is nothing that is quicker, there's nothing that is more accurate than actually getting it directly from the customer in a non-direct way. And what I mean is that we talked about the old school way of putting people in a room and having a focus group, which can be pretty much artificial. When people don't know that you're actually listening to them, they tend to be much more organic and truthful, whether they're happy, whether they're ticked, or whether they're just expressing what matters to them. So how do we assess that and decide what to act on and what not to act on? Well, you look at that as trend-based over time. Is this something that is just a moment and a blip? Is it something that's expressed over time and in volume, right? Or velocity, how quickly something is taking off? Is this something that's going to turn into a crisis communication situation if we happen to have a service outage? Or is it a blip that is something that you send over to the customer service team and just say, hey, flip a switch and reboot something? Because people in California are complaining about it, or people in Asia are complaining about it. Let's take a look at it. So being able to look at that and be it over a trend-based time versus just an immediacy is something that this team helps us do. We also look at it in when we launch campaigns, right? So we look at it in what we can do to set something up. But if something actually doesn't actually take off, we can modify. So when we launched the playbook last year, one of the first things we understood, in addition to not having all the apps that people want, was that they were having an issue with the power button, that it was too small. That did not come up in user testing at all, but they expressed it in social media saying, boy, the one thing I like about it is the quick little sleep button. That thing is so hard to find on the top of the product. Another thing that came up was that the media didn't understand how Bridge worked, how you can actually pair your playbook to your phone. What does that mean, Bridge? So that was something that we were able to flag immediately because it was expressed in social media, that we could modify our tactics in explaining it to people who are actually test driving the product or reviewing the product. I think we applied that within 3 weeks, that we were able to just reassess and then remarket it and showcase it to the journalists. That saved us a lot of money. And we were able to apply that communication to change it to the people who are influencing what you shop for, what's important in purchase and use themes. Let's go to the next one. Oh, wait, down at the bottom. We also use this data to make sure that we're spending in the right places. When you look at audiences and what they're expressing about you, let me just use an example. There's one blog that came out against us commenting on something in the last couple of weeks, right? But we were just getting ready to actually execute a big ad buy there. Sarah came to us and said, why would you go there? Let me look at the data. Nobody on that blog actually talks about you. As a matter of fact, they're friendlier to the competition. Where you should be spending that money is over here, where people are actually open to discussing your product and considering it. Don't spend $2 million here, spend it over here. That to us is spending efficiencies and incredible return on marketing investment. When you're talking about spending in the 7 digits and doing it in the right places, that's incredibly powerful information. This is one of the reports we came up with last year in looking at understanding what the consideration points are when you're shopping for a smartphone or a tablet. And I call it purchase and use themes. There are certain criteria that people use to whittle down what they're going to buy. What are those product characteristics that people most consider, right? And who influences that, number one. 2, where does our product stack up against this? So if you look at what people are considering when it comes to messaging, the cost of a phone or a plan, the design of the actual product device, how good is it in web browsing? What kind of apps do you have? Those are the top 6, top 5 topics that people are discussing. And if we're not messaging in that, if we're not present in those consideration sets, we're not going to be a factor going forward. The key here is to understand what those main topics are for your products or for your audience set. And how can you influence in with that? How does your product stack up within that when it comes to people actually even putting you in the consideration set for purchasing? But you can't stop there. You have to understand how they actually use your product and what consideration sets go to that. So for us, here are the, and I should say smartphones in general, we looked at this from a top level thing. Here are the main topics that come into how do you even get into the purchase conversation. And I don't think these bubbled up for us initially when we were talking about it internally on what we should market, what kind of ads should we do. But contracts. And we have no influence on contracts. That's a carrier decision. But for us, we recognize that we actually have to talk to this when it comes to what people consider if BlackBerry's even in the conversation. This is incredible inside information for our marketing teams and our sales teams and our partner teams. But they wouldn't have had this data if we weren't doing this kind of data mining out in social media. Go ahead, sir. You can go down to the audience level. Obviously, there's lots of millennials here in the room. I'm pretty old. So I rely on people like Sarah and Anthony and formerly Brenna here to tell me that I'm an old fogey when it comes to the conversational topics and even the types of copy that we use. But when it comes to an audience, let's go back to purchase consideration actually real quick. So here's some over the year, and this goes over the whole base, and anyone who would buy a smartphone. And then you go down and you start doing it at the audience level. I think, what is it, 3 out of the 5? No, 4 out of the 5 are different, right? So apps wasn't even there before. Web browsing was. Video playback is important, screen size, and then the carrier conversations. So when you look at them as a percentage of who buys your product, you need to understand within that percentage of audience-based what's most important to them and target your conversations and your marketing plans accordingly. So for us, when we look at this overall in the market, well, how do you go out and you talk about apps to someone who's my age versus someone who's in their 20s? It's a very different thing, right? I want stuff that's just going to get me to work, help me manage my family life, right? All this kind of stuff. It's very different from, say, like my younger brother, right? So there's like a 20-year age difference between the two of us. And what is most important to him is very different. And so you need to be able to understand what and how you talk to those people, but what that content actually is. And that's incredibly powerful and, information about efficiency. So, smarter choices. Within that main topic engine, we drill down even more. If apps is a bigger part of the decision process and how I actually use my phone and how I'm going to make people happy with the phone, what are they saying about apps when it comes to a purchasing consideration and use conversation? Do we have cost of apps? Are they comparing it to Windows Phone 7? Titanium backup, where the hell did that come from? I don't even know.
Titanium backup is a concern because when they buy apps on their phone, they're afraid that they can't migrate if they buy a new phone. So they're always afraid that they're out of pocket. And so they're very excited that Android has Titanium backup.
There you go. So when that popped up to us, I was like, I've never even heard that in a purchase and consideration conversation before when somebody's considering to buy a phone. But you can't get that kind of level of insight from that unless you're digging even deeper. So one of the things when we go out and look at it and what are the top level conversations, if I take an app conversation to, a VP of marketing, say for the US, they're like, well, of course apps are important. But you have to dig down a layer deeper to just say, here's where we're stacking up against the competition. And what are those insights there and what are those bullet points? You know your strengths, but it's also important to know your weaknesses and how the customer is applying those weaknesses against others and therefore how it affects their actual decision in the purchase and consideration funnel. Go ahead. So when we look at this and applying it across all these various data points and what's most important, we also have to apply it to where we're going and where we participate in the conversation. What channels are most valuable for us when it comes to our customers' point of view? Where do we need to participate because where are they actually participating? Where are they? Where are they having these conversations? And as you saw earlier, the majority of our conversation happens on Facebook and Twitter. But Google Plus is also becoming more important. Always important is where they're actually blogging and where they're being influenced, so we need to participate there as well. It's an ever-changing landscape when it comes to devices too. What features, new data sources, evolving privacy changes. I get asked a lot of questions on, well, how many people on Facebook are actually talking about us? How old are they? Where are they based? Right? I can't control what level of data comes out of a third-party platform, but you can affect it if you get people to opt in and share. When it comes to more content, you can't scale fast enough, right? You can't hire enough people internally, can't hire enough agencies to do it. You have to be in partnership with your customers, right? Hopefully they'll share the types of content that, and influence, if they're happy with your product, be able to talk about it. More people complain than they do compliment, so you have to be able to manage that. You have to understand that and the nuances of it. But there's always going to be more data to mine, especially as new platforms launch. If we look over here and we look at Foursquare, we look at Tumblr, and then of course the favorite that's coming out right now, Sarah's new favorite. How do we participate on that? How can we get them to build a BlackBerry app, actually? It's an ever-evolving and changing landscape, and one of the reasons we partner with expert agencies like Networked Insights, we have another partner back here, Edelman. Thank you, Rob, for coming. On our day-to-day conversational levels. It just helps you make better decisions. So I know I'm giving you a lot of marketing speak, and it's not real sexy when it comes to talking about social media, but the value we provide to the organization is beyond just having that day-to-day conversation with our customers. It's the insights that help make better decisions internally that affect how things go outside and go externally. It helps us make the right decisions when it comes to marketing spend. Spending it in the right places, on the right types of content, and the right types of activation. When Sarah showed the things earlier for Tim Hortons and talking about coupons, I so would have been all over that if I worked for Tim Hortons, right? Make it easy for people to share the good things about your business. Make sure that you are visible. To be eminently visible in this business is probably one of the most important things that I do on behalf of RIM. Where are people shopping? How are they shopping? What's most important to them when it comes to making a purchasing decision? In the consumer marketplace, it's the personal relationship you have with your brand, it's what your friends say about that brand, and what the experts say. Therefore, I make a huge investment in making sure that we have a great relationship with our customers and that we're eminently visible where they are. I make sure that if they're happy with the product, that they're reviewing it, that they're rating it, and those reviews or ratings are visible in the right places where they shop. Google is where they start, or Bing, or Yahoo, right? So making sure our content is very visible in those search engines, making sure it's very visible on our carrier sites where they're browsing the various different plans, and in retail. Increasingly in the US, people are going into Best Buy because you can buy any phone on any data plan. The majority of consumers research online before they go in store. So I've got to make sure that we're visible online, but then take that advocacy and those product ratings and make sure they're appearing on the end of the aisle. So that's going to be a big effort for us this year as well. So social has an impact not only online, but in store, right? How do we get it actually going from word of mouth as well, in person? So we do events. We make sure that we're very visible in the marketplace. We make sure that we're reaching out to the right type of customer so that in those face-to-face interactions, they're telling their friends about us. All these things you can find online on what works and what people want you to do as a brand. They will tell you, they will express it, they'll tweet it, they'll write about it, they'll Facebook share it. They will put it everywhere. You just need to go find it and be able to package it in a way that makes sense to your internal constituents. So if I talk to them in my daily social media speak, they'd look at me with crossed eyes and just say, what the hell is sentiment? What the hell is velocity? So you need to be able to take that, package that, and do it in a way that they can take it and put it into their marketing practice or into their sales practice or into their product development practice. And that's one of the things that Anthony helps me do, is to be able to interpret that into strategic action. It's not enough to have the information. You need to be able to take it and put it in a way that can actually affect your business. So that's about all I have to share today.